Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Chaos Standard podcast. My name is Uncle Flacco, and I'm so glad that you've joined me here today. For those of you who don't know, I am a casual events organizer on Untap Open Leagues. Specifically, I'm the Brew Off guy. If you don't know, Brew Off is an ever-changing format where I come up with a restriction on either like what sets are allowed to be put in or some other challenge. And then either individually or as a team, you build decks and play them through an event. Um, One of those events in the past has historically been a Chaos Standard like card pool, but um, I have played in Chaos Standard like events for 4 years now. I think it was right around the start of the pandemic that I started doing these. But I should also talk to you about what Chaos Standard is. Chaos Standard is an event run by my friend Mason Mank. It is now a 6-set format where you choose where 6 sets are chosen, and you have to build a deck in the allotted couple of weeks that you get, and then you play in an event, and then after that, the older 3 sets get rotated out for 3 new sets. If you want to play with us, there will be a link in the description to the UOL server, and then you just go over to Mason's Chaos Standard, and you can get started there. So, what is the current format? I want to say what the current format is at the start of all of these podcasts before we jump in, because I will either be using examples from past Chaos Standards or the current Chaos Standard, since that will be a good way to get an example of what I'm talking about for these without reaching like too far-fetched out into other formats. I will be referencing other formats from time to time, but I'll try and keep it relevant to Chaos Standards so that if you either want to do your own or if you want to jump in with our Chaos Standard, you will be better equipped to do so. So, the older 3 sets in our Chaos Standard are Plane Shift, Dissension, and Original Theros. And the new 3 sets are Strixhaven, Dominaria, and Original Zendikar. So, finally, now that we have a little bit of background, let's jump into the topic of today's episode, Deckbuilder's Guide to the Galaxy, aka how to start deck building. There's a lot of cards from a lot of different time periods, and it's all very confusing. I don't know where to start. That is a very valid response. And so, hopefully after this episode, I will have given you enough places to start looking for what deck you might want to construct and tips on how to build your first deck or two in the format. So, let's get started. First of all, how do I search for cards? Well, the first way is to go to a place in which you can search those cards. There is a Scryfall link in the description as well of the format that I just described to you. That is always a very good place to start. However, my preferred way to search for cards is using Cockatrice. Cockatrice has a very helpful feature in which you can enable certain sets and disable other sets, so you aren't seeing like the entire card pool of Magic and trying to load it whenever you're loading Cockatrice. You can just disable all the sets, enable the sets in Chaos Standard, and now you have a very easy way to search for cards. It's awesome. So, what types of things can you search for? If you're using Scryfall, almost anything. And if you're using Trice, less of almost everything, but you can still search a lot of different things. Some more useful ones will be searching for the power and toughness or the mana value of different cards. You can search for card types. And a really big important one that you will be using a lot is searching Oracle text. Being able to search for the Oracle text of cards is so important. You can search for different keywords on creatures or just keywords on cards in general. You can search for universally good mechanics, things like countering spells, drawing cards, destroying things. And that's not to mention all the different sideboard things you can search for. You can search for artifact and enchantment to try and search for naturalize or disenchant effects. You can search for like exiling graveyards or shuffling graveyards for graveyard hate. You can even search up different color words if you have like some really old sets that have particular color hating cards. It doesn't have to be old sets necessarily, but a lot of color hating cards tend to be from older sets. So, like core sets have a lot of different color hate in general. So, you will be searching for all of those things and more, and it is very useful. I cannot tell you the number of times each format that I just search for different Oracle text things. It's definitely something to be familiar with. So, when constructing a good deck, it will have one or two different things. It will have consistency and it will have power in differing amounts. I want to go over consistency first. So, Original Theros has a cycle of uncommons, one for each color pair, for a total of 10 different multicolored uncommons. However, the signpost uncommon for draft didn't come around until Magic Origins and has been in basically every set since then. And you might be wondering why I'm talking about draft in a Chaos Standard podcast. Well, where there is a signpost uncommon, there is enough support in that set to support that draft archetype. And where there is enough support for a draft archetype, there's enough cards for a draft deck. And where there's enough cards for a draft deck, there's enough cards for a constructed deck. We got there. Will the deck be good? Maybe, maybe not. But does the deck exist? Yes. So, if you find a particular draft uncommon that you want to build your deck around, you will be reassured to know that you will be able to build the deck. Another good place to start looking for that is the lands. If there is good fixing in a particular color combination, whether it be 2 colors or 3 colors, that is always a good place to look for. In our current format, there's a lot of Simic fixing. So, a Simic deck, or a deck that is base Simic, is honestly not a bad place to start looking. Whereas there's only one singular green-white land, and it's a gain land. So, even though there might be a lot of good green-white cards, without the fixing for it, you're probably not going to get a great deck out of it. Also, any ways to make your deck smaller or make your deck more predictable are very good ways to up your consistency. A good way to do this is with card draw. whether that be drawing multiple cards at once, or, drawing cards over the course of a game, or even just like cantrips in the early game. Being able to draw the cards that you want when you want them is a very good thing. So, different kinds of decks will want different kinds of card manipulation, but um, in general, you will probably want some amount in whatever deck. So, looking over some card draw spells would be a good thing. Also, if you're playing a slower deck, like a mid-range or control deck, having some um, having some amount of removal, or maybe if you're playing a more aggressive deck, you want some threats. Being able to just search all of the creatures or all of the removal, and seeing if there is a good enough mass of removal is a very good thing. Like, for example, in our format, we have a 4 mana board wipe, but you get to play 4 of those. And when you combine those with some cantrips or some other card draw spells, it becomes a very good thing to have. On the other side of things, we have power. Individually powerful cards. These are the cards that you build entire decks around. For example, in our last format, um, we had the older 3 sets, but we also had 5th edition and Phyrexia All Will Be One. So, Atraxa was a very popular build around card during that format. And if you want to find some of these more individually powerful cards, sorting by price on Scryfall is a good place to start, because generally the more powerful cards will be more expensive. And also, when you're looking at some of these powerful cards and determining whether they're really good or not, a couple of things that you can look for are resilience. Maybe they have some sort of protective keyword, or maybe they have like some sort of evasion, and generating advantage, right? Maybe they draw cards, or in the case of Atraxa, they virtually draw cards. Or maybe like when the creature leaves or enters or leaves, it generates some amount of value, like creating tokens or removing other things, right? Like current format Ashen Rider is a good example of this. If you can reanimate Ashen Rider, Ashen Rider does very good things. Like, is a fairly big body and exiles things. The question of whether you can get it on the battlefield aside, it is a very strong card. Um, Another thing that you can look for is planeswalkers. Planeswalkers are first introduced in Lorwyn, and a lot of sets have planeswalkers now. Not every set, but most of them do. So just know that planeswalkers are very good at generating advantage. And they are very good cards to have in slower decks. Looking for some sort of combo, we can have an entire episode about like building combo and looking for combos and all that. But if you do find a combo, it is obviously a very good place to start. One of the combos in our current format is using Jadzy's backside. I think it's like Journey to the Oracle or something like that, with bounce lands. So, like, the lands will enter the battlefield and then they will bounce themselves back to hand. You can combine this engine with Tatiova, who gains a life and draws a card when a land enters the battlefield, and um, Journey to the Oracle will return itself back to hand. So, you will be able to just play. Also, Lotus Cobra's in the format, so lands entering the battlefield generate mana. And all of this, like, means that you just get infinite ETBs with lands, and then you draw your entire deck, and then eventually you can um, play enough lands and generate enough mana that like a Demon Fire will be lethal damage. And you might be going, hey, Flacco. That's like a 10 card combo. But this combo slots into an existing ramp deck that so it's more of like a ramp deck just accidentally has a combo finish instead of being a combo deck that wants to ramp, if you know what I'm saying. So um that is a very good thing to look out for. And also, um mana efficiency is a nice thing. If something is like very above rate compared to other cards, it's probably really good. Like Phyrexian Obliterators in our was in our format, and I think it was last format. That was just a format of 5/5 with upside, and we had Nykthos, so it automatically made Nykthos tap for. It already made it mana positive, so there were a lot of good things going on with Phyrexian Obliterator in mono black devotion decks. Now, I want to be very clear. Consistency and power aren't infallible. There are ways that they can go wrong. Let's start with consistency. When does consistency go wrong? Well, a very well known example of this is Diabolic Tutor. It tutors any card in your deck. That is really good. It's also 4 mana. You do not want to spend 4 mana for tutoring a singular card to your hand. I'm not saying you never want to, but ideally you are spending much less than 4 mana for that effect. You're spending maybe 3, but maybe you want to try and spend 2 mana, right? Like if you can't play Eladamri's Call and you're trying to tutor up a specific creature combo, Eladamri's Call is a really good card. But Diabolic Tutor is not. Another one is a card like Bitter Blossom. Bitter Blossom is a very strong card, unless the format is dominated by aggro. If the format is dominated by, let's just say, a burn deck, do you really want to play out a 2-mana card that makes you lose a life every turn? Like, sure, it can generate a blocker, but, aggro decks will have ways around that. Like, putting out a bunch of attackers and then your one blocker doesn't really do anything. Or maybe they'll have burn spells so that they don't have to attack into you, and then you just slowly kill yourself on a Bitter Blossom, right? Uh, there are ways that something like Bitter Blossom can go wrong. While Bitter Blossom itself is a very strong card, Skrelv's Hive was a card from last format that could very well do things. Um, it had a corrupted cost, a corrupted effect where it gave your toxic creatures lifelink, which was good, but usually you were losing a lot of life and the tokens couldn't block. So if it got answered in almost any conceivable way, it was just the worst card ever printed. Which goes into the other side. How does power go wrong? Well, one of the ways it can go wrong is it is contextually not what you want. Flametongue Kavu was in our first format, as it is in this format. In this format, it's a little better, but in last format, it was kind of not that good. A lot of the decks running around were playing a ton of tokens. Mirex, for example, was the best land in the format, and almost every single deck was playing Mirex. And Flametongue Kavu does very badly into Mirex. It also does very badly into Phyrexian Obliterator. Like, great, you did not actually kill the creature and you still have to sack 4 things. What did you think? What did you think was going to happen? So yeah, even though Flame Tongue Kavu is a very powerful card and is oftentimes just a like Flame Tongue Kavu's stats are like 3 mana's worth of stats, and then if you also kill a thing on top of that, it's worth so much. But if you're killing, 0 or 1 mana's worth of things, do you really want to spend 4 mana on that? Not always. So, um, you would rather kill like threes and fours and not tokens with it. And then another place it can go wrong is very obviously with a card like Lion's Eye Diamond. The payoffs are um, almost non existent, or maybe even literally non existent in any given format. So, LED, even though it is just Black Lotus, if you cannot use the mana, it is a 0 mana 1 for nothing, and you just cry. So, now that we know that uh, things are good and things are not good, maybe we have some sort of an idea for a deck. Let's talk about building our first deck to wrap things up. So, the way that I like to build decks is I will um, have some sort of an idea for a deck, right? Whether that be a specific archetype or whether it be a card that I want to build around. And then I start putting in one-ofs into the deck. If I see a card and I think that it could go in that deck, I just put it in the deck. And then once I have a ton of cards in my deck, I start looking at all of them and I decide, yeah, this is a card that I want multiple copies of, or this is a card I want one of, or, you know, looking at the number of cards in my deck, I think I can probably cut this one. There is also a difference between building a 60 card deck and building a 75 card deck. And while I'm not saying it's wrong to build 60 card decks, eventually you will have to submit on a 75. So, you will have to keep in mind whether the deck that you are building is a good 60 card deck or a good 75 card deck. This is where looking up sideboard cards in Scryfall is a really good thing. Um, ah, Once you have the non-lands, it's time to put in some lands. One of the best resources that I can give you is both articles by Frank Carson about how many lands you should play and how many colored sources you should play. Obviously, it's good to look at the utility lands, and utility lands are very good, but being able to draw enough lands and draw enough colors is very, very strong. So, how many lands should I play? Well, conventional wisdom says somewhere around like 19 to 20 lands for an aggro deck, 22-ish lands for a mid-range deck, and like 24 to 25 for a control deck. How many lands should I actually play? I feel like my script is trying to tell me something. Greed is good, but so is actually casting your spells. Ah, I get it now. Play your lands. I cannot stress this enough. If you think you're playing enough lands, you're probably playing one or too few lands. Play more lands. Play ways that you can use your mana in the late game. Play your lands. It is so, so, so important to just play your lands. There are decks that I have seen in these formats that play 28 lands. There are decks that play so many lands, and I still find that those decks sometimes do not draw their lands. It is so, so, so important. Please, for the love of God, play more lands. Did I do a good job? All right, I think they got it. So, outro segment. Uh, you know, I don't exactly know what to do with this. Maybe you write in some questions and then I could quickly answer those at the end of this. Maybe I can spotlight some decks. I would love to hear your feedback on this question and the rest of the podcasts in general in the comments below. Other than that, thank you guys so much for listening. And I hope to see you not only here in the next episode, but also maybe even in UOL. We'd love to have you there. All right. See ya.